Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Classic Dune, and welcome back to another strategy snapshots here with Ginger. And Ginger's a longtime Dune player, one of the OGs on the server, so he's got a lot of knowledge to share. And so let's just start it off. Take us away, Mr. Nobody.
Yeah, Ginger, thank you so much for joining us, man. I know you've been around for a while. So yeah, I think we'll just get right into it. Okay. So, before the cast, I had asked you a couple questions about kind of your three preferred factions whenever you play. And for those viewers at home watching right now, we've got the Spaethan Guild, the Harkonnen, and the Atreides, which is quite the interesting spread of factions. So before we get into the questions, can you kind of, I guess, take us through a little bit as to for each of these factions, sort of what kind of draws you to them, and why they might be an attractive option for somebody to select?
Well, I think the way Dune works is that every battle is extremely punishing. Everything you take is extremely punishing, and while you can plan, you can almost never isolate um that last 20% of the risk of losing, from the battles you take. You can say, well, I haven't seen a poison weapon, I haven't seen a trade, and so you can try and narrow down the risk you take in battles. But there's a 20% chance that your 10 stack or 5 stack or 19 stack, whatever you send, just disappears. And so I think the principal like purpose you need to be serving is risk reduction. And when you're making plans, and that's why I like Guild Atreides and Harkonnen. BG to another extent serves this really well with their advisors, but won't talk about them today. Um, Obviously, Guild's advantage is turn order. You basically have the final say on, or as much as possible, the where troops are on the map. Like you can pick battles and ignore them if you, or deny the existence of a battle by moving first. Atreides sees what everyone has, and I think the really underrated part of Atreides is that if you look at two factions fighting each other on the board, you have a good idea of who's going to win that. That can inform your decision. It's not just about you seeing the future for yourself. It's also you see, oh, Ark fighting Fremen, or Guild fighting Emperor and Havania. Okay, well I know who's gonna win those. You know, and Hark is it's between these two very sort of controlling, methodical factions. Hark is a bit of an outlier, but I will say that um, Arc benefits a lot from resource acquisition in the sense that as good as a tradie is at say picking out cards and developing a good hand, um, they only have 4 card hand capacity at the end of the day. They can't keep a perfect hand and a Truth Trance and a Karama and a Hajar and a Weather Control and all the other fun stuff that you need to, pull out a win, close out a win. And Hark's hand capacity and card draw is so strong. And just being able to just bank stuff and sit on it until you need to use it, it's crazy. Plus, you are the main introducer of uncertainty into the game board. So you're insulated from that in a way because you're the one who has the surprise cards and the biggest trader threat.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm glad you said that because I really feel like that eight card hand limit is like such a powerful tool. It was kind of a aha moment for me when I realized the fact that, like, especially in base game, when you look down and you see what you have in your hand, it's like you were saying about that 20%, you can really cut the odds depending on what you see in your own hand of what the probability that somebody else has, right? So it's like if you have four snoopers, not necessarily very likely, but if you have four snoopers, it's like that every poison weapon you have is an unblockable, instrument of death and destruction. So
Yep,
it can
it's
really,
it's like it's like the game the Ixians play, with the denial of information and access. Like, oh, I know what card, what
Mhm.
could be out there. So
And
Yeah.
especially with how they come out of the gate swinging. I mean, Harkonnen, they buy one card, and now they have what for everyone else is a full hand. And three out of four of them are unknown to the Atreides. They're
Right.
super destructive. That hand limit and extra card is probably their strongest ability.
Yeah, and the captured leaders things really makes that faction have a lot of teeth. I mean, you can't just get into a frivolous fight with them, especially if they're at that 4 or 6, card hand size. They've got some spice left in the
Yeah,
reserves. Like,
it's a great deterrent. It's really like a lot of the things it allows you to, I think there's you want people to fight you as little as possible because even like even if okay, I play my high leader and I play some cards, like I still gotta dial a little bit, maybe like if you want to be 100%, right, on a lot of combats,
mhm,
you don't have to pay to be 100% very often. And so that can, if you can take the risk, right? You can take the risk that they're just lowballing me. They're just trying to get me to flush out my resources, right? When they send in, one PG or five Fremen or whatever, right?
mhm.
Um, but that's still, but if you want to be 100, but if they call your bluff, if they call you and they dial and play a good leader in defense, then you can lose a lot more. So
Yeah,
it's incumbent, if you want to ensure against those like small little attrition stacks or spice blow fights, you're always dialing if you want to ensure that 100%. Um,
yeah,
Heart doesn't really have to deal with that because people they lose more than their investment in the battle plan, and it's really great, especially for like setting up for a win. Like when Heart goes for the win, obviously people fight them and they bring a lot, but you can put two, in two strongholds. Let's say, move out of the city, say go to Habanya and Twix, and or when the shield wall activates, if you play with that house rule, which I think is a pretty important house rule, the shield wall stronghold after like a few worms. Um, but nobody's gonna contest that. They're not gonna be like, ooh, it's like if you play guild and you set up in two strongholds, people are on your ass immediately, right? Because they know that
right.
you know that you're weak to that, you're weak to fighting, and that if you're on two and you have turn order control, you can sometimes just get deterministic victories, because they can't react to the turn order manipulation. Whereas Harkonnen can set up for a win in relative peace because people are like, why? I'll deal with it when it becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is a good segue to the first question, which is specifically from these particular factions. Whenever you go into a game of Dune, and let's say that you're Delta Trades, Harkonnen, or Guild, do you kind of go in with like a macro kind of strategy in mind? And if it's like yes for one of the factions, but no for some of the others, that's perfectly acceptable. Or do you prefer kind of just to play it by ear?
Uh, I'm a very like cautious player. I think that and I think that the correct way to play Dune is not the fun way to play Dune in the sense that I think the game is still obviously I think it's very fun played, but you need to play cautiously. You need to like it's not a guns blazing, you're always fighting, test of skill, like it's about making that plan and protecting yourself over until it's your turn for the shot at the strongholds, right?
Mm.
You know, until the stars align. Like you need people to be worn out. You need, it's very the victory condition in Dune is very transparent, right? And therefore, and it's also demanding, like 4 out of 5 or out of 6 if you have the shield wall. It's difficult. Like it's very difficult to have, and there will always be, it's usually alliance victories that win. So there's always going to be 4 people against your two, right?
Mm.
It's not. It's you need a big swing to like actually get across the finish line there.
Yeah, in
And
Dune, a
so
win is either like just by a tiny inch, or you were dominating the game leading up to it, and there was no chance of stopping you. It's that's why like a lot of the high skill games they just go to 10 turns and then it ends because not enough people make mistakes in order for someone to have 4 strongholds.
yeah, exactly. Like a perfectly played game of Dune, it mostly ends in stall out, right? Where in base game, guild has that privilege. I think and some of the house rules that we play with on the server have moved it over to Fremen to give them some love, which I think is probably the right choice. But
Yeah, I was just gonna say I really feel like that stall out victory should just get removed off a guild's card and just basically be placed on frame and just basically says if nobody's won by the end of the game, you win.
yeah,
I mean, it's
I've
their it's their home, you know.
any home groups out there that play the game and struggle with guild stall out or like feel Fremen are weak because they are weak. It's by far the weakest faction. We were actually joking earlier in the voice chat. We were talking about how ideas to buff Fremen,
It's
but
tough. I would say like
and
90% of my Fremen stall out wins are everyone hating how the guild player was playing, and so they orchestrate my win condition because they can't themselves win. It's just like, damn it, I'm
yeah,
not gonna win this, but I'll be damned if guild wins the game after 10 turns of sitting on their hands. And then, hey, you know
yeah,
what? A
but
win's a
just like
win.
just swipe. But yeah, to any home groups that struggle with stall out, just swipe the ability from guild and put it on Fremen, and it'll feel better. Um, that being said, Guild is just like it's my most beloved faction. Um, again, like even if it doesn't have stall out, but like especially when you have stall out, it's just so much insurance and control. Like you never have to take fights that aren't critical. You don't have to fight for spice blows. You don't have to, position ahead of time to secure strongholds because you can position anytime. You know,
Mhm.
you just need some cards and typically weapons because Staban is almost always a traitor and he's your only good leader. So you want to prioritize weapons and collect spice, beef up,
I am so
keep your troops alive.
I'm so glad you said that because I've been kind of leaning on that, because like their leader spread is I think it's still the weakest in the game. I don't think another faction's come out yet
Yeah,
that's
Chome.
that's lower than theirs. Chome's got a lower. Well, they've got
They
two
got a
fours, two
lower
threes.
spread, but they got that leader they can revive every turn in the Auditor.
Yeah,
But Rishes is also pretty bad, but somehow is still a little better than Guild. So yeah, they've basically got the worst spread.
yeah, because I mean, and we can actually, at some point in time, if you ever do this, it'd be very interesting to talk about because it's like I feel like because of the guild leader spread, and it's like Ginger was saying, they can kind of pick and choose when they fight. Sort of the funds that they get from people shipping in. It's like, yeah, it's better for you to have like a poison weapon or projectile weapon and just take a 50-50 coin flip and try to kill their leader and just beat them on the dial. But like the Fremen, it almost feels like the inverse. Like your leaders the qualities are so good that
Yeah,
you want the opposite. Like you want to be
Fremen,
able to
Fremen,
protect Stilgar or Shawnee
Fremen
and
want defensive. Yeah, Fremen want
yeah,
defenses, guild want weapons. It's a reflection of the leader pool that you're dealt with, right? Same thing
right,
with the
right.
Atreides. They're always searching for that double defense so they can utilize the Kwisatz.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing is that like this is one thing that is that objectively the best traders in the game, Staban, Tuek, and Phaedra. Because
Mm.
well, actually Phaedra's a little bit lower because Hart can capture leaders, but they both deny two strength to the opponent. Like if even if Emperor, like you have what they call
Ramsham
it, if
and
you have
Fenring.
yeah, if you have Fenring, you can still play a Ramsham and it's only +1 strength that you are denying in a battle. Like if you
Yeah, those are the
right.
only highest leaders where the delta between the next is 2. So it's crazy
Yeah,
strong having them.
yeah,
Well,
a full
this
two.
kind of actually rolls in kind of nicely to the next question, which is how are you thinking about allocating your funds? Because we basically just talked about how important it is for guilds to get a weapon. Obviously, with Harkonnen, it's very important for them to get cards, and with the tradies, it's like you want to get that perfect hand as soon as you can. So, kind of from turn to turn, I know guild's a little bit of an outlier because they're an economy faction, but typically, let's say you start the turn with 10 spice. Is there like a cap you have? You're like, listen, I'm not going to pay any more than like X amount of spice for cards this turn. Are you thinking, well, I've got to spend,
Um, I mean, Hark always wants to be bidding. Hark should always be bidding at least three to four spice on the cards, and just buy whatever. Just keep buying whatever. You don't really ever want to spend five unless maybe it's good, like Atreides bids it up and you have a read. Hang on,
Mhm. Then
sorry.
as far as funds going into maybe like shift people down and some funds to kind of save for combat, what's kind of your thoughts on those kind of things?
Um, leave two, leave at least like two spice to ship people down. You don't really. I would argue, especially like buying cards earlier is better than having much for Dial, because the only person who can really present a Dial threat is Emperor. And I mean, if he wants to dump Sardaukar on you, he can. It's not a good strategy. Like you'll both like he can show you who's boss, but like it'll cost him too. He doesn't get anything out of it. So it's like
Mhm.
it's one of those things where it's like, well, they could do it, but like they shouldn't. So why worry too much planning against it? It's like
That's how the Krell
Yeah,
crush
no.
works. Just when you least expect
yeah,
it.
Well,
it's
Krell's
but
a
it's like
madman.
especially like if as you know, Arc should have four cards. Atreides should have like at least one good card out of the bidding, right? And should see what Emperor gets. Like it's usually a cautious Emperor, unless he draws like Pocket Lasgun or something, is gonna dial, is gonna It's and Guild isn't a threat early. Fremen will just get their leaders brutalized by Hark and Atreides. So yes, you have to respect the dial on Fremen on the spice blows. Like if they move 10 to a spice blow and you move 3 or whatever, yeah, maybe you can make them dial, but you're probably not collecting that spice either, right? So it's a waste of your time. Although you
Let
might
me
be
ask
able
you
to get
this.
leader spice.
Let me ask you this, Ginger. Are you a turn one bid your spice with the guilds kind of mentality, or do you just kind of sit back and not really be competitive in the first bidding phase?
If I can get a card for 4 spice, I think it's worth it.
Okay. Okay. So four is kind of where your limits at.
Yeah, I think 4 is the price for cards usually, like just in the early rounds. For Hark, it's because they get 2. For Trades, it's
Yeah.
because they should be spending on a good one, and for Guild, it's because they have enough money to spend 4. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
money that goes to the Emperor eventually goes to the Guild. Only two
For the guild.
factions that you don't really want doing well, unless they're your ally, are Fremen as Guild, are Fremen and BG, because they do not contribute to your income at all. It's kind of like there's an important dynamic. One of the most important dynamics I think when you play Emperor is that the Fremen are your best friend, and you want the Fremen to succeed wherever possible, because every bit of spice that the Fremen get just goes to you.
Yeah.
Because cards are the Fremen's only expenditure, cards and bribes.
I
Likewise, it's a smaller
that's
dynamic with Guild because, obviously Emperor, Arc, Atreides have other stuff to the Great Houses have other stuff to spice on than shipping, but they are your shippers. BG doesn't ship, Fremen don't ship.
Right.
the
Well,
interesting way the economy in the game works is one of the reasons why Emperor is such an interesting faction, despite only having two abilities, and really only one of them is very important.
Yes, Fremen. Yeah, sorry, Emperor is like a great class and like master class and how like simplicity can actually still be interesting.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
two
absolutely.
abilities. You have bonus troops, and you get money from people buying things, and it's still like one of the most interesting and most played and favorite factions of a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, he's such a powerful ally, and it was, kind of like you were talking about the relationship. It's like there are some factions, unfortunately, for the guild that either don't rely on having to ship, through normal standards. So you just, you're never going to collect income from them. I mean, very rarely will the BG ship down unless they're, really trying to blow you out in a battle, or at least in my
Well,
experience.
unless they're allied to the Emperor also, and they haven't or
Sure.
their advisors are, it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, and that's kind of what I was getting at is like you can get those kind of like, all right, hey, you built up a reasonable stack. Once you flip, send a couple girls down. You can probably beat them out in combat with a voice. But yeah, it's like you said with the Emperor, it's like, you really need those cards in order to make the fights worth losing the resources. It's like it needs to be worth the
Mhm.
risk. And it's like if you got no cards, it's like you don't know if your leader's gonna make it, and you definitely have no way of killing their leader unless you got a random traitor or something. But well,
Yeah.
speaking of the relationships between the factions, let me ask you this. For you in particular, what are some considerations for when to ally versus when to stay solo, and then who do you look for to ally? And let me
I
be
think.
specific on it. Sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I
I was
just
gonna
when
say,
let me answer the first question just because
yeah, sure.
I have it on my mind. Yeah. So when to ally, when to stay solo. You um I wanted to talk about cards later, so I was trying some out here on the but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
staying solo is very you almost always want to ally. Because it's utility, it's one less person who can fight you, it's usually some form of protection and or a form of an alliance ability or subsidies in the form of emperor or guild. Um, but the only times you don't want to ally are when A, you think that you have no shot at winning or win pressure in alliance, and there was no alliance that could give you like all the better alliance abilities were snapped up. So it's like you and Fremen are left over, or Hark, and Hark traders are not that great. Fremen free revivals are not that great. So you're like, I'm gonna stay solo, and I don't think I'm gonna win solo because everyone else is like powerful, right? Like let's say you have like a BG Hark Alliance and Emperor Trades Alliance big on the board, and then your guild and Fremen left over. Like you don't really want to ally Fremen. There's not much you can do for each other. You can maybe you offer the Fremen cross shipping, right? Say,
Hmm.
okay, I'm gonna stay solo, not play for a win, try and like prevent anyone from winning. And my idea is, while I stay solo, I'm less of a target for the other 5 players, right? I can make better deals at a premium. I can protect strongholds. I can, like spice and peace while everyone else is fighting. That's one sort of the like the Atreides submarine. Like okay, I'm gonna stay solo just to recover resources, and next Nexus we look for a play. And the third
Hmm.
kind of solo is aftermath. There's been a nuclear apocalypse. The tanks are full of people, and you're like, I am one of the last factions standing. I actually have better shots at, maybe I have 3 tech tokens or something. I'm into strongholds. Let me just go for it. Let me see what they got. Right.
Yeah, no,
But
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I have noticed, like, especially that third option you're talking about, where it's like, if you have a player and they play very passive and they're sort of biding their time, and then all of a sudden it's almost like you blink and it's like, yeah, between the other 5 factions, they may have, 40, 50, forces in the tanks, and, leaders have been killed, a lot of cards are out of there, and you're just like, man, like, really the only person that can kind of threaten me is maybe the Fremen, but the Fremen, they're way over here, and they collect in spice, and they're not close enough to, they don't have enough in
mhm.
reserves even after revivals to really ship in and do anything. So yeah, maybe I can try to pull the trigger and go for it.
One thing I also wanted to talk about is like cards and the. I know this sounds silly, but like cards and how important they are to winning a game. In the sense that I'm gonna put last gun all over here. Then yeah, a toxin. Basically, Atomic's like under weather control. It's like a small footnote. These cards are like the ones that are Hajj is very. These cards are the ones that are most important to winning games. Like obviously you need combat cards to make it work,
Hmm.
to actually like win fights. Although sometimes you can just win with dials. But in Dune, because the victory condition is so transparent and defeats are so punishing, and everyone knows what you're going for, right? You have to pull some kind of surprise, some kind of. There's two ways to win. You either fully destroy everyone because defeats are so punishing, right? You have a material advantage that just cannot be beat. You know, a, this is the kind of wins where like they just win by dial in like 3 places, right? And there's nothing you can do about it.
Hmm.
And or they ship in to a person like let's say BG has no or let's okay. let's say Atreides has like one troop here, right, and they're all in the tanks, and they move last in storm order. And then as guild, you interject, ship into the Atreides here, and nobody else can fight you because Atreides move last in storm order. They can't move out and let someone get in. Now you're here and you win by dial. Right? So you need some kind of surprise for overwhelming advantage. And the way Gola and Lasgun work is that you create an overwhelming advantage on the previous turn by taking big fights, blowing up stacks, and then either resurrecting your troops afterwards with Gola or enjoying their tanked, forces.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next turn you go for a win. Weather control with the Family Atomics combo works the same way. Although I will say special mention weather control is my favorite card in the game. Manipulating turn order, locking down strongholds under storm. It's just such a fun card, and it's one of those like it's not always just gonna directly like win you a game or a battle like a Karam or Truth Trance or Lasgun will, but it can deny a battle from happening. It can by manipulating which board state, like who moves first and which strongholds are available. Weather control is a great card, great card. Azure is mostly useless except when it wins the game. Which is kind of a weird spot for a card. It's like one of those cards where it's like, yeah, well, what am I gonna do with this? Like, when do I really want to movement? Okay, well, sometimes it's useful. It's one of those that's like, ooh, I'd love to see this in my Harkonnen hand, and in any other hand, I'm like, this takes up a slot that could be providing value, right? Because you want all the cards in your hand, in your small four-slotted hand, to be providing you value. That weapon or defense provides you value every turn that you hold it, right? Either protecting you or attacking opponents. I don't think the Kurama needs any introduction on how powerful and surprising it is. It just, it's the card in the game, right? It's the ace. And Truth Trance, right? I think the strongest use of Truth Trance is usually just as a combat card, specifically to dick over the Atreides or an Atreides ally. Like it negates and flips prescience. They ask you what defense you're playing. Right, I play Truth Trance. What weapon are you playing? And it's done. Right.
Yeah, Truth Trance is actually my least favorite card on the whole game. Just because of all the discussions about situations on, niche cases that never actually happen. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I think
definitely the
the
most.
other amazing use for Truth Trance is like, if we were to fight somewhere, if we were to fight, will you play a certain weapon or will you dial a certain amount, right? If possible. And then, I just played a game like a week ago where there was like an Emperor stack in Twex, and he had like 12 troops. And if he dialed, uh, more than 10 of those 12 troops, I couldn't. If you dialed less than 11 of those 12 troops, I could win the game. Okay? So I say, are you going to dial, 11 or more? That stack. I fight you there. And he says, yeah. And so I ship in one troop.
oh,
And like, all right, well, and then it then has to dial. Like, there's all Truth Trance is like it rewards creativity. I think the best way other people have talked about this, but the best way to think about it is locking in people's courses of action for the future. It's less about finding out information and more about like making people commit to courses of action ahead of time. Also, chaining, like you can chain different clauses together. Say, do you have a weapon or my leader as a traitor, right? And they say yes. If they say yes, then you don't take that fight, but you don't know which one it is. It doesn't give you a lot. But if they say no, you then got a lot of information because you chained together like 2 or 3 or statements, right? Of what they could have. And you know that you're good to go. Yeah.
And kind of a follow up on that, like, could you get like very like granular with like your question? So, for example, like let's say that you're the emperor and you're going to fight against the Harkonnen, and you drop in, or before you go, you true trance them and you say, "Hey, do you have either a poison weapon or uh, a traitor of mine that is strength 5 or higher?" Like, could you get like
Mhm.
very
You
specific?
could, and but I think the risk you always run is that like the more specific, the least specific the question, the more statements you chain, the less information you get out of either like the yes or
Mm,
the no. The
sure,
answer
sure,
that you
sure.
don't want to hear, right? Like if I say you have one of my like leader that's 5 or higher and a poison weapon, okay, he could have a ramsham, he could have fenring, he could have a poison weapon. Like
Hmm.
one of those is true. I mean, hell, I don't even know if chemistry counts in that. Like you'd have to specify, or chemistry with a like there's a lot that could
I've heard of
like
people
sure if
like
they say
breaking
if they
out
say
logical
no.
statements and then saying, "Is this statement here true?" It's like, yeah, X or this and that, but not this. It's like, geez. Whew.
Like,
Well,
okay.
yeah, but the narrower the question, like, but then
It's a
the
gamble.
more,
It's like an
yeah,
information
it's a
gamble.
gamble, right? Like you really can nail someone to the cross if they say, yeah, all those statements are true or not true, right? But if like just one of them is true or not true, then the whole state, then the guy like who asked the truth trends is kind of left scratching the head, like, well, be this,
Because I got no
Yeah.
information.
Well, just to kind of bring it back to the latter half of of the question that I asked, um, who are you typically looking to ally with? So we typically talked about kind of when you want to stay solo, but we can take it from, like I said, the Atreides, the Harkonnen, and Guild perspective. What are you typically looking for? And I kind of want to be specific about this because we had asked this question in a previous cast, and I think at the time I had kind of created 3 different qualifying factors, which is out of the advantage the alliance gives you, the board position of the person that you're attempting to ally with, which includes what you know about the amount of cards they have and or the type of cards they have, and I think the last category was like the player themselves, like if
I
it's
think
a
it's I
player
think
that.
it's I think it's pretty like if you can see I think there's two chains of questions. First,
Okay.
you see yourself winning with this person in 1 or 2 turns. This can depend on a number of things. I mean, I'm not going to list all of them, right? But do you see yourself winning with this
Mm-hmm.
person in the next 2 turns, this turn or the next turn? Um, yes, ally them, win the game.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see yourself if you don't see yourself winning, like if you don't like see the line, of you guys winning immediately, then go for the player who provides the best value over time. And this can be, someone who's wealthy and can subsidize you, or someone with like BG with a combat ability that like makes you teethier in every single fight that you're in over the next few turns, right? That can allow you to collect more spice, etc. Right? BG is almost always a good ally as long as they have some money and they're not, just in the tanks or the shitter. Um, Emperor is good if his troops are alive and other people's are not, right? Emperor is one of the things is like it's not enough for Emperor to be rich, everyone else must be poor for Emperor to be useful, right? Because his advantage is numbers. And if BG like it doesn't matter if Emperor can ship down 15 if BG can ship down 5, right? Ted can ship down 10. Um, Similarly, I love a good Atreides Guild alliance. I think it's secretly um one of just the most toxic alliance, and it doesn't feel that way, which is funny. Like a lot of it doesn't get a lot of as much hate as it should. But I think Guild Atreides is so incredibly controlling of the game state in like ways that people don't realize until they just win. Because you know ahead of time what the turn order is, who will be where, who could be where, because Guild controls that, and then Atreides knows who has what. Right? It's very simple. It's very like omniscient. Um,
It theoretically allows you to control almost every single variable in the game.
it feels so safe. Obviously, again, things, surprises, which have to, I guess, come from a Karamad Prescience round or Harkonnen hand. Surprises in the forms of like fancy cards, can change things. But at the end of the day, um, Harkonnen is very much like just uh subsidies is usually the best for Harkonnen, more so than combat abilities in terms of like long-term staying power. Um, as long as Harkonnen can just like, it doesn't matter what if as long as Harkonnen has cash to flush through like the deck to like, you can cycle basically the whole deck as Harkonnen Emperor, right, and just get an amazing hand. You're fine, right? You don't, who cares about voice if you have a Karama? Who cares about prescience if you have a Truth Transcend? Who cares about Guild's Doomstack if you have a Lasgun Shield, right? And then Hark more so than the others, but Hark more so than the others is trying to. Hark excels at punching down and at threatening wins, right? Like having board presence. So, you do want to look more for those alliances, the alliances that have like the 2 turns to victory sort of thing, right? Other than that, someone to fund your dragon's horde of cards. Which
And
again,
let me ask you this:
go for it. Sorry.
Speaking of the funds, as Harkonnen, do you prefer the Emperor Alliance or do you prefer the Guild Alliance?
Well, I mean, short answer depends who's doing better, right? Who has sometimes Guild is richer.
Mm.
I think, I think, I think I prefer Guild on the exception of if there's a potential for Emperor to form something really dangerous, like Emperor is looking to ally Atreides, and it's gonna be a pain in the butt. Like,
Mm.
I don't know, right? It's like, um, I think, I think Guild is definitely better for winning than Emperor, because it's like you can deploy all your troops on the map, and as I mentioned, Harkonnen is one of the only factions that doesn't suffer. Harkonnen and BG are the 2 factions that suffer least from having board presence. Everyone else, as soon as they actually, and Guild, because they can sort of like move last and leave battles, but everyone else, Atreides, Emperor, and Fremen, specifically Atreides, Emperor, and Fremen, suffer the most from having people on the map. As soon as you put people on the map, they are a liability. Right? As soon as troops get on the board, they can all be wiped out, right? Or you have to fight battles to prevent them from doing so, and spend resources, reveal information. EG can flip. Guild can move out as ways of fighting this, and Harkonnen, people just don't want to fight you, or shouldn't want to
Mm.
fight you if you're a good game. So, Arc BG is amazing, but it's so spice starved, right? Like if you can get it to work, it's yeah.
I think
Probably one
that
of the
is to your
best
point.
part about about Harkonnen Guild to me is that Harkonnen's most likely already got a decent setup, probably 1 or 2 strongholds under control, and just those worst failed win attempts are the ones where you could get it, but you get stronghold blocked. But if you're allied with Guild, they could just go earlier
Exactly. If
or
you're
go
allied with
first.
Guild, you don't have to worry about Guild blocking or
Yeah.
Guild, shenanigans.
Not only you
And
don't have to worry about Guild blocking strongholds, they're a lot better at getting into them before they get blocked. It's really
exactly, like
perfect.
this is the synergy. This is the synergy with like Hard Guild. So you'll deploy like 20 troops on the map, right? And you can put them in the far strongholds where no one wants. Like if they want to fight you, they have to like ship. They're not. It's not the cities, right? Where like people can like move around, hop around. Put them in the far strongholds, and then you have like a baseline control of 2. Guild moves last or first, right? Depending on like, and can snipe opportunities. And this is the Guild Harkonnen secret synergy. Is that you put all the troops on the map as Harkonnen. Nobody really wants to attrition them because they lose leaders. And they're not even stuck there because you can cross ship, right? And you have done Guild like looking for opportunities. Like Guild like kind of like hangs. Guild is so much better when you stop trying to block the win and start like threatening it, because it hangs like the turn order hangs over the rest of the table like the sword of Damocles. Like I can go whenever. Like I have like 20 troops, you know. I have like 5 in a stronghold and like 15 in space, and they're just gonna dunk on anyone if you slip up, let any opening, happen. Right?
If you accidentally give them a deterministic win, they will take it.
Exactly. It's so yeah, guild. You're playing against guild. You have to be so careful to because they're everywhere. Now, granted, their presence is the weakest. That's how they pay for it, right? They have very no combat abilities, piss poor leaders, low revival rate, expensive revivals. Well, everyone has the same revival rate. It just costs more for some people. Um, and their income is like guild income is interesting because it is less than emperors, but it's also like more reliable than emperors. Like if people want to move down to the board, they will ship. They will ship. If they want to be on the board, they have to ship, right? So barring Karamas, uh, it gets paid always, and usually like not always on the turns that they want to be paid. Like the early turn, like people often aren't shipping on the early turns, but guild will eventually get paid, right?
Mhm.
Emperor, like I'm sure we've all had the experience of like playing Emperor, and then you go like a round of bidding where like nothing is more than 2 spice, or like the next round is like again you're like, oh my god, like I'm you don't even pay your own operating costs.
Yeah,
But
Yeah,
yeah.
your emperor and your little poor, like, don't worry, I'll make it all up in bidding. And then you realize that half the table's full and the other
yeah,
half is only
exactly.
one
Yeah.
Like when
slot.
Malister had made that comment too, because he was, in the episode we did with him, Emperor was one that he had kind of talked about. And one of the things that he made very clear is like, listen, as Emperor, even if it means that you chip down on the board and you get in some fights just so you can clear your own hand, he's like, it's very important that you are getting down on the map. You're causing ruckus. You're fighting with people, not recklessly, of course, but,
people need to want
he's
your
like,
product.
yeah, he's like, look, you can't fill up your hand. Like, you got to be very careful of that. Or if you see that everybody else is, starting to get full, but nobody's really fighting, you can be the person that kind of, stirs the beehive, so to say.
Do some bounty hunting even.
Emperor
Yeah,
needs as Emperor. In a way, you got to think of yourself as a salesman for cards, right? Like people need to want your product. Maybe there's more money. Like maybe Guild sells. I was gonna say maybe Guild sells oil, right? And Emperor sells yachts. Like maybe when the market is poor, people aren't buying yachts. Then maybe there's more money in yachts than oil, but everyone always needs oil, right? Like they're always gonna need to move places.
right. Yeah. Well, speaking of money and money flow, we can kind of jump into the next one. So, Dune is I would argue it's a game that is just as important above the table as it is what's going on the table, sort of the relationships that you form, in game, be it's like, hey, listen, we got to make sure that such and such isn't going for a win. So you kind of arrange some third fights or some block strongholds, or, I'll pay X amount of spice for some information. So, in regards to making deals, kind of what are you looking to achieve um, from the perspective of these three factions?
If I think from the perspective of any faction, what you want is you want everyone to fight each other, spend their resources, and not fight you, and give you everything. Right? Which means you want to encourage, you want to use, bribes and talk to fight as little as possible. Fighting is, or if you fight, it should be like a punching bag fight, like where you're gonna win. Um, and I think the best way is just make it easy for people to do what you want, right? Like, as like let people have something. If it means like that someone else is gonna fight, like oh no, Hark moves into Tauber. Okay, well that's probably gonna create conflict with the Fremen, right?
Hmm.
Make it I and it's a difficult question to answer because it's very open ended. But
Well, how about this? Let me get specific. So let's hop over to the Atreides for a second. We'll use a very specific example. So Atreides, right? So one of the most common things that they sell is card knowledge and card information, particularly in
mhm.
the bidding phase. So for you specifically, when do you make the decision as to how often you're selling, how frequently you're selling? What I mean by that is like, are you saying like, hey, listen, it's sort of an open bid. As long as you give me a spice, I will, I'll let you kind of peek at the card regardless of it is. Are you a little more like reserved with like, well, hold on a second, let me look at the card and make sure it's something that I want you to know what it is? Are you a yeah, if you give me a few spice, I'll, let you see maybe one more card than it would cost you normally, just paying like one spice per card. Kind of what is your idea as far as like how to control the bidding phase with them?
I think it's very much like I think the price for you do try and get early game. You want more cash, and you can like I could show every card for like 7 spice or something, right? Yeah, it's not
Hmm.
great. You don't feel good afterwards, but it is life is better. Except maybe like the one that you try to buy, right? Or just but even then, I unless I make some sort of like deal before the bidding round for like some total sum payment. I don't I almost never make the deal of like I give you 3 peaks of your choice. Um, I would much rather just have like more like okay, Emperor, you see the whole bidding for this much spice or something, right?
Hmm.
Um, or if it is like peaks of choice, it's got to be like you can sell it in the future, like for favors on the board. Like you're in a board turn, you're fighting over spice blade. Say, hey, look, buddy, just leave me alone. I'll give you some card peaks, right? You sell them in the future. But even then, I'd much rather cache it with like first 3, that come up instead of like their choice of like analysis because I feel like hiding the important cards preserves the value of your knowledge for later, right? Like if the Kurama comes up, I'm not showing people, like, you know, that's between me and whoever gets it.
Hmm.
Because then now that information has value to the rest of the table, right? If it's
And if you
between
do
me, whoever gets it.
sell like peaks that are whenever they want it, you got to make sure that it's at the start of the bid, because I mean sometimes I've seen where the Atreides will say, "Oh yeah, you get 3 peaks, in the next 2 turns whenever you want to use them," and then Atreides starts bidding on a card. It's like, "All right, I'd like to cash in my peak," and then
Exactly. I'd like
now
to
you
see
get
what you're
into a
getting.
bidding war with the card that you wanted
Yeah, that's
because
the other advantage of like Atreides and Guild. Guild has the same problem everyone else does. Their hand is transparent to Atreides, and Atreides is loud mouth that tells everyone. Right? Guild has the same issue that other people do. But Atreides and Harkonnen are effectively the only factions with secret hands. Like people don't know what you have. It, Atreides doesn't tell people what they have, and Harkonnen, has some stuff that Atreides knows, but it's mostly secret.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
and I that's why they're my favorite is because winning in Dune requires surprise. It requires this sort of like overwhelming crushing. But they cannot, like, despite the fact that they know how you're going to win, they cannot. It's very difficult to do, right? You put everyone else in the tanks and you walk on the board, or you sneak it. Like, and that's most wins. Most wins are sneaky, right? It punishes
Yeah. Yeah.
punish mistakes, you punish mispositioning. Because of course, a perfectly played game at Dune goes to turn 10, right? No mistakes, no victory. It's but surprise is essential to help your opponents make mistakes. Being able to surprise them is critical, right? And Atreides, Hark, and Guild can do.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
even
No,
found it's very important to make sure that when you as a Atreides see a card you really like and you want to get, you got to make sure that if you start bidding high on it, you actually do get it. Of course, don't go down with the ship and bid all your spice on that card just because, but like so many times I've been able to get really valuable information on Atreides just because they're bidding really high on a card and then I get it. It's like, oh, it's a snooper. Oh, well, good thing I have this poison weapon and
They
now I
don't
know
have,
that
yeah,
they
exactly.
very likely don't have a snooper.
Yeah, it's that's something that happens. Like when you bid as a Atreides, you really want to make sure that you get it, or that it's like a generic value card, right? You don't want to be bidding high on like on snoopers or shields or like basic weapons, because then it tells people that you don't have them. And that's happened to me before, and that's happened, I've done it to the Atreides before. It's pretty common.
It's
Yeah, yeah,
it's an
yeah.
easy
No,
trap
I
to
like
fall
that.
into, chasing your losses.
No, no, I mean, but that's really smart though. It's this idea of like even if you need it, don't panic bid to let them know that you like really need it. Because it's more important that you, I mean, especially if they peeked at the card, it's like it's more important that they don't know how valuable it is to you than you necessarily get it right there because you don't know if the next card is going to be, another snooper or another projectile weapon or, it's not like you won't see another one coming up later in the bid necessarily, especially if it's one of the
Yeah,
earlier
there's
cards. So
there's nothing worse than like, trying to bid 5 spice on a shield, and then someone bids 6 and takes it from you, and then everyone knows that you don't have a shield, and then it's like,
Yeah. The few
yeah.
times I do play Atreides, I like to always, on principle, either never bid when it's below 3 or always bid when it's above 3, just so that you can't really be
Yes, you
you
have
can't
to.
be
That's
mind
the other
gamed.
thing for tradies. You can't do. Um, it's often like I found that like bidding high, like trying to like modulate your bidding prices, just creates the impression like people are like, oh my god, he's playing me. Like both ways, and they will outbid you. Like you don't want to be like. I mean, Emperor loves it when that happens, right? When a treaty's like, if a treaty's good bids 5 and then 2 and then 5 and then 2. People's reaction isn't, ooh, the people's reaction is always like, oh, this time I'm getting mine. Whereas if you just build 5 across the board, right, or 2 across the board, then they admit that they can't read anything into that. Right? Kind of interesting, but that's
yeah,
yeah, that's one of.
yeah,
It's also something that like I'm not very good at. Like I am not very good at feigning my interest in a card. It's just like I can tell. I think I'm good at like telling when people actually want the card versus don't want it. But I don't think I'm good at like hiding my own interest. Like when I want a card, I think it's very obvious to the table that like I really want a card. But
mhm.
so I don't have advice in that regard. I guess my advice is get more spice. Get more
Mhm.
spice so you can get your cards, and then your cards will give you more spice.
It's always
Ally with
funny
a
when you
very
can
loose
trick someone though. That's that's one of those nail biting moments when you're
grip.
bidding up on a Kulon. You got to figure out how high to go before you pass. But I
Yeah,
I
it's
don't generally do that just because it's a losing game in the end. Eventually, you're gonna buy
all right. Well,
a card for 5 spice, and now you have to play it in a battle to get rid of it.
Yep.
final follow-up question, my man. So when you're kind of deciding who at the table you want to kind of broker with, bribe, or deal, what are some of the factors that kind of go into your decision-making process? I remember earlier you said that part of what you're trying to do is basically just to get everybody to spend their resources, their troops, get them in the tanks, get them away from you, and then that way, you can kind of comfortably play your game and hopefully win there shortly after. But what is sort of the lead up process to that in order for you to gain those like little edges through making those deals with people?
Um, Speed up process. You mean speed up in terms of, well, I think it's important to make sure that you have something to offer people. And again, I think that it's important to make sure that not to, again, like the thing I know I'm beating this like a dead horse, but Dune is about surprise and
Hmm.
locking people. Like people will, they see your win, they see your possibility to win, and they think, okay, well, I have such like 3 countermeasures, or like I have these 2 countermeasures against it. You got to make sure you have something that can deny what they have, right? A block, like stronghold block or turn order thing that prevents them from fighting you, right? Or a karama that prevents them from using their ability against you. Um, and when you're dealing with people, you got to make sure that um, it's kind of like poker. It's like you got to make good deals. It's got to be something that they want 80% of the time, and 20% of the time it's a bluff. right? It's like it's actually you really do not want to take this deal that I'm offering, right? Because it's way too good for me. Right? And that's I think the psychology in negotiations in Dune is that you got to make it like 80% of the time this is genuine. We both gain a lot out of this, right? And you got to
Okay.
slide in enough like swindles in there that it's you winning the game and not them.
So let's take that. So like, can we kind of either use a real example, or maybe create sort of a hypothetical so that we can kind of get a better idea as to
I think the
exactly what we're talking about.
easiest example is fighting, in the sense that like in terms of like, especially as like, let's use the example of Atreides. I think the best case scenario, I think they're the easiest to demonstrate this concept, um is that they say, hey, look, hey buddy, Emperor, you go fight BG has only defenses. Hey Hazimir, or Fenring, you actually can just dial them. Like you don't even have to, like, their voice, if they have no weapon, they can't create a leader difference, right? So you just have the same
Hmm.
leader. Play whichever one you're more confident isn't a BG traitor. And dial even. Or truth trans their ask about their dial, and because I know you got that truth, and I just like I give you this information. Go at him. Go get him, Tiger. Right? Um and that's a good deal, right? Like, and the other thing you can do is you can give a similar offer. Like you can say, hey, look, you're gonna win. Hey, Guild, go fight, Fremen. You're gonna win, and then actually like Fremen wins or something, right? That would be like that 20%. Like 80% of the time, it's hey Emperor, good. Um, I think another example of Guild is allowing people to take certain courses of action, right, by staying or protecting them. Guild can offer people protection on the board, right? Like, hey, I'll move first and I'll block this stronghold for you, on the condition that, of course, you don't go for a win and you give me some spice. What that does is it takes, pressure off someone and places it on anyone else. For example, let's say Atreides has 10 stacking, in Arakeen. Right, yeah, let's for visual effect. Atreides has 10 stacking in Arakeen. If Guild blocks them, right? Now, while Guild might be vulnerable in Twigs because they no longer move last, but if Guild blocks them in Arakeen, that Emperor or Harkonnen aggression, like if they have cards they want to burn or like people they want to fight, is directed away. You can you can sort of like indirectly, like if nobody is fighting Atreides, right? Because you've stopped them from fighting Atreides, and you know that resources are going to be spent elsewhere. Like they just always are spent elsewhere, right? The aggression is
Hmm.
redirected. So this sort of like indirect, like this can be like seen as like an indirect attack on Harkonnen, right? Like by protecting the Atreides, I am shifting Emperor attention elsewhere, right? Something like that.
I think it's a great choice for Atreides specifically because that kind of incentivizes them to throw at least seven of those forces at someone else, so that they can get Kwisatz early. Go fight the Harkonnen early, go just doomstack a spice blow because they know that they can throw those forces around and still have Arakeen for next turn 100%. So they can get those
Yeah,
Thopters, get that spice, and then ship more fast forces back there if they want to keep it, or walk the rest out if they don't.
and I think the other example with Harkonnen and the same sort of thing is that, like, as Harkonnen, offer throne fight, like offer like people to flush cards against you, you know, or like whenever you fight someone, just split, like, like you go, hey Fremen, this spice blow here you're on. I have 4 cards, you have 1 card after this round of bidding. It could move in, but I'd rather just tax it. Like, give me 2 of the spice from Minor Erg, right? And I go move somewhere else. And Fremen say, yeah, sure, because they have no other choice. And then you go somewhere else. You go to, the other spice blow and say fight the Atreides there, right? And so And that way they can all like there's ways to like manipulate the potential actions of like and use your advantages. You want to like be generating value from your advantages. Harkonnen is scary. He's scary, right? You know, get money for being scary and get board presents for it. Atreides similar. Atreides needs more resources to be scary because they need better, they're slower to accumulate a hand. They need more knowledge about everyone else, but like late game Atreides, very scary, right? He's scary. Guild, protect people and punish mistakes. Like it's not they're also unlike I think Emperor is the most diplomatic faction. I would argue that Guild and these guys, my favorite factions play the board more. I mean, Guild literally is just all about like the actual physical board manipulation, like where troops can be, right? And Hark is more about cards. Yeah, sorry, I kind of ran out of my thought mid sentence there.
No,
I
it's okay.
think
It's
it's a
okay.
pretty good thesis on these three factions to just say, leverage your passive strengths. As the Harkonnen, you're very intimidating. People don't want to fight you. Go early and stake your claim somewhere in a stronghold or a spice blow. You always got to think twice about whether or not Atreides has the knowledge of whether or not they can beat you. Take advantage of that, and especially Gil, try and see if you can lock down two strongholds uh,
Yeah, and again,
sneakily.
it's so much better. Like the best way to like wear other people out is just don't fight yourself. Like yourself, just don't get into fights. Use your abilities to control the board such that you can get resources and not fight unless you win. Right? It's about control, right? And denial of opportunities.
That's really it. I've won an
Yeah.
Emperor game where I didn't actually win any fights. It's just I managed to avoid fighting. I managed to support my future ally, and then we did end up allying, and then we were just both so strong. We controlled every stronghold on the board, and they won all their fights, and I lost, one of them, and the other one was uncontested, and then there you go. We win. Win without
Yeah.
winning a single fight.
It's yeah, I've had games. I remember the last hard game I recently played, which was the Dream Rules, but it still applies to like GF9 because they're similar factions. They're basically the same faction. Um, is that I had like two strongholds on the board, and nobody had been fighting me because I had, weapons and presence and threat. And the turn rolled around, and Atreides also had two strongholds and good resources. And I'm like, look, deterministically we win. Like we just win. Like there's just not a shot. Like I had like Fade was called a traitor earlier in the game, so like Emperor didn't have him, Fremen had him, and so Emperor couldn't fight against Fade. And I'm like, look, just ally me, we win this round. Like there's not a world like so if you got to preserve your resources until those opportunities like come up. And all these factions have like ways of like saving themselves and yeah.
I agree.
Uh, I think that's great advice, man.
Yeah.
That's very, very good advice.
I've
Ginger,
also been in guild games where I the only battles I ever won were ones where I just dialed a disgusting amount of troops in. Like at like the last round, like my ally controlled two, and then I shipped like 9 into one and moved 11 into another, and dialed 8 and 10, and it was gross, but it won. Sort of thing, right? And you just have to have the spice to do that, and you know the cards to enable. Like I had it like a truth trance, which and I used in my allies fight, and then my ally gets two, then I just get my other two by like you know throwing away 18 troops. Like that's the threat opening with guild.
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that yeah, there's a sort of a common motif between these three, especially now that you've kind of explained your perspective in various things. And I mean, I will say probably one of the things that you had said that is definitely going to stick with me is always looking to be leveraging those little kind of micro advantages you have to kind of build up and build up and build up until, somebody looks down and there's like, oh, wait a second, like we've been fighting each other and, X faction, is not in the tanks and the rest of us are, it's like this could be a problem.
Yeah, then you better hope that they don't have the cards to close it out.
Mm. Well, Ginger Man, listen, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Um, this is actually the first time you and I had ever spoken together, so thank you for
It's nice
taking
to
this
meet you.
on. Of course, man. Yeah, and listen, if you're back on the server, we got to get some games in at some point in
We
time because I
do.
think it's one thing to talk about this. It's something else to be in the middle of it and sort of feel all of these plans, these plans within plans, kind of getting enacted. So yeah, we'll definitely have to make that happen. Jay, you got any follow up?
No, nothing. That was a great talk. But yeah, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. That's Dune. That's why you gotta fly by the seat of your pants. Be opportunistic.
Oh, that's yeah, and minimize contact. I'll
Yeah.
always preach cowardly play.
You've like single-handedly inspired a whole guild play style, so I would say you're definitely right about that. All right, well, yeah, that was great. That's gonna do it. So I'll catch you all later.